Hello, welcome to another episode of Prove All Things. Want to thank everybody who's joining us today, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or X, or on the CGI Digital Network app, whether that's on your phone, tablet, or television. We thank you for joining us here live, and for everyone else who's watching or listening later, we thank you for joining us as well. I'm joined with co-host Mike James. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jeff, doing well. Good to see you today. Hey, Jeff, just a quick announcement. I think next Tuesday we will not be live. I think we're going to have a recorded program since
it's going to be the Feast of Trumpets next Tuesday. I was thinking about that. It's like, I don't think we'll be able to do a program. I'll be speaking. You probably be speaking as well at this time. So if you're watching at the same time at 12 o'clock next week, I'll be giving a sermon if anybody wants to watch that.
I'm going to be in Phoenix speaking, heading towards, after that, I'll be driving east towards Tyler to do a couple baptisms along the way as I make my way to Tyler for Sabbath services that week.
Yeah. Since we were on last week, we had, I guess, a tragedy happen in our country with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I think that was, something that affected people in different ways out there. I know I knew a little bit about him and watched some of the stuff on YouTube and seen some interviews and different things with him. One thing I didn't know about the man is that he was a Sabbath keeper, and found that out, just recently, because seeing some of the things that he said about keeping the Sabbath and keeping from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, and how that as a Christian, that was a good thing for him. And also he was really big on God's law as well, from what I saw some interviews. So I thought that was really, I guess it's sad to lose someone like that, who was definitely taking truth, I guess, to the college age students out there about a lot of different
definitely
things. I know he's political, and again, may not agree with all the political things about him, but as far as his Christianity, I think he seemed like a solid guy.
Yeah, he seemed to be someone who was trying to learn. He was definitely came from the time he was 18 up until now. He just recently started to talk about his Sabbath observance. I think he even wrote a book that's going to be published later this year on how he came to understand the Sabbath and started to.
It was actually
he worshipped on Sundays still, but he was keeping the Sabbath.
Yeah. So he was on his way, on his journey towards understanding things. And again, somebody advocating for God's truth, I'm definitely with that, I guess. And again, I've been interested to read that book. It was like the #1 bestseller on Amazon when I looked the other day.
Wow. I think it hasn't even come out yet, but
it hasn't come out yet.
Tragedy's kind of popularized things.
Yeah. So again, it's a tragedy for a lot of people out there, and we definitely recognize that, and definitely prayers for his family and for any of those suffering from that loss. And it's just I guess a sign of the times we live in. Those type of things, happening in more and more frequently out there. But again, today we have a little bit something. We're not going to talk about that too much, but we're going to bring in our guest today, who's a guest we've had many times before, and one of our favorite guests. He is AJ Sanchez. How you doing, AJ?
A favorite guest. I keep getting promotions every time.
Yeah, from a great guest to a favorite guest, because you are one of our favorite guests.
That's awesome. Special favorite. Well, thank you. I appreciate being on here again. I would like to interject a real quick thing about this Charlie Kirk incident. Yes. And the guy, his biggest thing that he spoke is the truth plainly, and it offended a lot of people. When there's this silent story that goes on that you don't say certain things in public, and he broke through a lot of those barriers, and he said a lot of things, especially about the illegitimacy and lack of having a father figure in the home and how important that was, and that offended a lot of people. The idea of a patriarchy, we can't have that. But and this is something I think a lot of our young people need to realize, is if you're telling the truth and the truth, there's a target on your back.
Mhm.
And if you're not in covenant with God, you haven't made a commitment to Him. It's the worst place to be, because A, you got a target on your back from Satan, and B, you're not in covenant with God. You're not. He hasn't promised to protect you. There's a certain level of protection you get that God allows you to go through this journey. If you're not in covenant and you're a young person, it's a bad place to be, because you're
Mhm.
out there on your own and they're out to get you. And
Yeah.
so I tell this to my son. He's not baptized yet, but those types of protections and promises aren't offered to those who aren't in covenant. They haven't been baptized. So
Yeah.
my heart goes out to Charlie Kirk and his
Mhm.
family, that he told the truth, and a lot of people are hating him for it. A lot of people. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it's a shame. It is a
Yeah,
shame.
it's awful. Several years ago, I had someone try to kill me, and that was a horrifying experience to go through that. I escaped, and the person was arrested, but it was, when you go through something like that, it's people come after you for whatever reasons they got, and it's sad when that happens. All
Well,
right,
let
so
me.
yeah, so what do you got for us, AJ, today?
I'd like to continue our discussion on the lost tribes of Israel. We got kind of cut off. There's so much material there; it's hard to get through all of it at once.
Right.
Um, and so I'd like to pick up where we left off. I'd like to recap a little bit, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, as most Bible students know, the 12 sons of Jacob became the 12 tribes of Israel.
Hmm.
And then around 920 BC, the United Kingdom split into two kingdoms: the northern nation of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah.
Hmm.
And then around 790 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel, they became a vassal state under the expanding Assyrian Empire,
Hmm.
meaning the army comes up to your front door and they say, pay us taxes or else. And they agreed to pay taxes. Well, shortly afterwards, they rebelled. They tried to rebel from Assyria.
Hmm.
They put down the rebellion and they started deporting them. And so the question comes up, well, where did they go? Right?
Hmm.
Well, the echo chamber for most of academia is a couple of things. One is there was only a few thousand Israelites anyway. And then after the destruction by the Assyrians, there was hardly anybody left. And they just simply got assimilated into the Assyrians, or they fled to northern Judah. And that's pretty much the story that all the experts are going to tell you. Well, there's a lot of problems with that theory. First of all, there are numerous official military records from the Assyrians, cuneiform records, that show the Assyrians didn't slaughter the Israelites, and that actually they were very careful to try and get everybody to these two deportation areas alive.
Hmm.
And then secondarily is that conservative estimates, once again, based on official Assyrian military records at the time, not a historian trying to put together all the clues several hundred years later, but at the time, you can easily estimate between 1 and 3 million Israelites were deported. Okay.
Okay.
And then there is some evidence that some of the Israelites fled to northern Judah. They thought they
Hmm.
would go across the border line and
Right.
then they would be safe, home free. Well, we know
Yeah.
from scripture and from other Assyrian records that Sargon II came through and deported everybody in northern Judah, right?
Hmm.
And he came up to the city walls. So if you had property, you were okay. And so probably there was a lot of Israelites that moved there and they got deported as well.
Hmm.
So God got all of them. Okay. When God says you're going to go into captivity, it happens. And so at that point, the question is, well, where did 1 to 3 million Israelites go? Well, there's a very interesting article by, let me pull this up real quick, um, by Angus Sutherland. And he is the editor chief of Ancient Pages. And he's got a great article on this topic. And this is very interesting. And there, like I said, there's a lot of other um, articles that talk about this. But this is what they say about the Scythians and the Cimmerians, right? Although the geographic origins of the Scythian people are hotly debated, the evidence for their first time and appearance in history is not. They appeared at the same time and of nearly the same area of the Israelites' disappearance. And that's our first big clue to the fact that the Israelites didn't disappear. And there's a lot of connections that I brought up earlier that shows that the Scythians and the Cimmerians are the same as the Israelites. You've got cuneiform records that show they were taken to the two places that the Bible says they were, which is Halah and Habor along the Gozan River. If you look here real quick,
that's in the Bible, right, AJ, where they were taken. Yeah.
Well, the Bible and cuneiform records from the Assyrians agree they were taken to Halah and Habor along the Gozan River in this area here, and then over here next to the cities of the Medes, right? Or actually right up in here is where they were, right next to Lake Irma. Right. Well, there's the Scythians and there's the Cimmerians right next door. So that's what Angus Sutherland's talking about. And there's no archaeological records that the Scythians or the Cimmerians existed prior to the same time that the Israelites disappeared. So
again, if I was a detective, that's very interesting circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, very interesting circumstantial evidence. Right. You happen to be there at the same time the guy shot. You know, it's kind of a smoking gun. And so, and another very interesting find is there's a book by Anne Grade Christensen. She is part of the Royal Danish Academy of Sciences. Okay, so she's not a nobody. She's an Assyriologist, and she spent a ton of time studying the origins of the Cimmerians. And this is what she comes up with. There's scarcely, and it was in 1990, I believe, she published this book. There is scarcely reason any longer to doubt the exciting and very astonishing assertion propounded by the students of the 10 tribes of Israel that the Israelites deported from Brit Humri of the house of Omri are identical with the Cimmerians of Assyrian sources. Everything indicates the Israelite deportees did not vanish from the picture, but that abroad under new conditions, they continued to leave their mark. And so she made this by reading cuneiform records. She was able to come to the conclusion that there's definite evidence that the Israelites are the Scythians and the Cimmerians.
Question. Hey, question. Maybe you answered this last time, or maybe you can answer it right now. So why was the name changed? Why weren't they just called the Israelites there? Why is the name now Scythians or Cimmerians? Why is their name changed?
So it was very common during that period of time, Middle Bronze Age and beyond, that nations were named after the dynasty, right? The dynasty of the king. And so, like, for instance, in Judah, they didn't refer them to the house of Judah. They referred to them as the house of David. And there's a Tel Dan stele, that was found that refers to the house of David. And so the house of Omri is referring to the most famous king of King Omri that the Assyrians had respect for. And so then they just called the northern tribe of Israel Brit Humri, which just means the house of Omri. And it's either Brit Humri or Qumri. And so they basically later be called Qumri is the name that was associated with it. And we see that on the Behistine inscription. When the Persians, once again, are referring to the Scythians and the Cimmerians, they call them the Qumri, which is basically a truncated version of Brit Humri.
So the word Scythian and Cimmerian, is that more of a modern English, like what we call them, or they were calling them that then, and later people like historians call them Cimmerians and Scythians?
It came from Herodotus, and I don't know where Herodotus picked up from, but he's the one who referred, and other Greek classical historians referred to them as the Scythians and the Cimmerians. Well, the Cimmerians is actually from the Persians as well, because they had different ways they pronounced it. But the Scythians, came from the Greeks. But once again, the Greeks are piecing this together 200 years after the fact.
Right. So again, this is somebody 200 years after the fact called them this, but you say the records we got with the Assyrians, they call them House of Omri.
Right, or the Qumri.
Okay.
The Qumri
Or the
is what
Qumri.
what
All
the,
right.
the
Okay.
Qumri is what they call them. And then we've
Right.
got a bunch of other sources that also make it clear that they didn't disappear off the face of the planet. You know, we've got Josephus, which I mentioned before. He says the 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates and are in an immense multitude. And then we also have the record of Jesus Christ. You know, he tells uh, the 12, he says, do not go the way of the Gentiles and do not enter into a city of Samaria, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that's a term that was used through prophecy, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. So Christ knew what he was talking about. And then the book of James as well, you know, he addresses his epistle to the 12 tribes, which are in dispersion, all 12 tribes, not just the two that were there in Judah. And he's not even talking about the ones that were there in Judea. This is those who are out in dispersion.
Okay.
So there's plenty of references to the fact that the 10 tribes didn't disappear off the face of the planet.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one other big point to make about that is just the idea of history back then compared to history today, and how, you know, we keep track of everything and are watching everything in the world. The world is now, you know, one in a sense, but back then it was a completely different story of how people were keeping track of whatever's going on. And somebody might write something, but you know, it was based on, you know, this or that. So
and I think a lot of the ancient records were lost too. That we only have certain records that survive from them.
Yeah, there was a big fire in Alexandria that had a lot of historical records, and
there's also a big bias against the scriptures, and we shouldn't overlook that. For instance, Herodotus. So what has happened is most historians, they go off the theory of the Herodotus that the Scythians and the Cimmerians came from the north. They were expanding.
Hey, real quick, for people watching, tell us who Herodotus is for people who are out there.
He was a Greek historian that lived during the time of, or just after the time of Alexander the Great, when the empire was fighting against the Persian during the Persian Wars. And he kept most of all of our information about those Persian wars came from Herodotus, but he also had his histories that went about 250 to 300 years before then. And he's basing this off, a lot of it's based on legend. And in his section of the histories, when he's talking about the Scythians and the Cimmerians, he doesn't even take ownership of it. He says, I've heard this. He actually has three stories that he talks about the Scythians and the Cimmerians. And the last one, where they came from the north, he says I've heard this story that's plausible. It seems the most plausible. He uses the word plausible. He doesn't even take ownership of it. And so what these historians have done is they're ignoring official cuneiform records from the Assyrians at the time these events took place, and they're discarding them in favor of this theory by Herodotus, which he won't even take ownership of. He just says it's plausible. Now, that's just really bad scholarship, really bad. And you can only attribute so much to incompetence, and eventually you have to assume intent. And to me, it's painfully obvious. There's an intent there to try and discredit the scriptures and to cover up who these people are. So that's my take on it, and that's belief. Now, so the question that comes up now is, well, what happened to the Scythians and the Cimmerians? Did they disappear off the face of the planet? Well, there's one of these historians. His name is Plutarch, and he was a historian, a biographer, philosopher at the time. And this is what he says. He says, talking about the Scythians and the Cimmerians, he says the Greeks gave them the name the Celts, and the Romans gave them the name the Gauls, the Celtic and Gaelic peoples. And if you've ever read about Celtic or Gaelic people, the words used interchangeably back and forth quite often. You don't know whether they're talking like Celtic or Gaelic. Well, it's the same word. It's just two different ways that they were referred to by the Romans and the Greeks.
And AJ, there's a comment. It's to your point. I just want to address it. Church elder says the victors always write the history. So people might wonder, like Jeff's earlier question, okay, well, why should we take what the Greeks said or what the, well, they were the ones who were in power. They kind of had the main histories that we have today. These other smaller people, like these Celts and Gauls, they were not the power. So that's part of this. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Another good source that makes this connection to the Celtic Gaelic or the Cimmerians and the Scythians is the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, I'm not a big fan of them, the Encyclopedia Britannica, because they are very atheistic. But in areas that it isn't politically charged, they do a pretty good job. And this is what they say about the Cimmerians or the Scythians. And they say this here in volume 5 on the article on the Celts. It says the Cimbri were universally held to be Celts. All the true Celts or Gaels in France had come across the Rhine River, and Belgic tribes in northern France were called the Cimbri. And ancient writers spoke of all these Gauls, the southern branch of the Celts, as the Cimbri as well, and identified them with the Cimmerians of an earlier date. So now we're getting more sources that are making this direct connection between the Scythians, the Cimmerians, and the Celtic Gaelic peoples. And another thing that's very interesting, I didn't realize this either, but there's a movement going on right now in the UK because the Welsh don't want to be called Welsh anymore. You know, that's what the English call the Welsh. Mm-hmm. And actually, they call themselves in their native Welsh Gaelic language, they refer to themselves as the Cimbri. And there's articles on it where they talk about how they want their name changed to the Cimbri or the Kimbru as a nation. And they emphatically state in a lot of their movements that they don't want to be called Welsh. They want to be called Cimbri. Well, that's the exact same name that Darius the Great called the Scythians and the Cimmerians. He called them the Cimbri. Mm-hmm. And so there's connections everywhere. And once again, I hate to say that how much incompetence can you have before you start assuming intent? You know, you guys can't see that it's the exact same word. And
there's definitely, you know, I did a big dive on this for the last couple of years, and there definitely are critics of what we think about this, or at least what some of the churches of God think about this. But again, the circumstantial evidence and the historical evidence, it's there. Yeah. You know, and again, I'm not going to try to make whatever anybody's opinion is fine. We're just here to look at information. But it's interesting to me that you should at least have an open mind and say, hey, wait a minute, there is a lot of information over here that you don't have a good explanation for.
And what about all the information they're suppressing? What about all that information? Why don't you acknowledge this other stuff and at least have a dialogue on it? And instead, because they've controlled the dialogue they just suppress all this stuff that doesn't fit their narrative. You know, but
let me ask you a question. Last time you mentioned, maybe you're going to mention this again, there was a document, was it William Wallace had written, or they had some kind of incorporation that mentioned their origin? What was that document?
It's right here. It's the Declaration of Arbroath of 1320. And it was, I mean, if you've seen Braveheart, you know, freedom, you know, that's the movie where right after the closing credits was when Robert the Bruce produced this document to try and let the Pope asked him for them to be recognized. And he's making the case, you know, we're not just a suburb of London. We settle this land separately, and it gives the history of the Scots. And in it, they say they came from Scythia, the original area of Scythia between the Black and the Caspian Seas. And they talk about the route that they take. And that is the same area where the Scythians and the Cimmerians were. So
I,
I mean,
I
once
found that document
again,
interesting. So after our program last time, I went and looked it up myself because like I got to see it for myself to see if this is what it says, and that's what it says. It actually says that, and it was interesting what the critics would say about it. They were just saying, well, they were just inventing a history. How do you how do you answer that when they say they were just inventing a history? Why would they say that other than maybe they're trying to cover something
what
up?
at 1320 AD, they knew that this was going to be a politically charged
Yeah.
uh, question come up, 600 years later. I
Yeah.
mean, come
Yeah.
on, really? They
Right, but
they
I
were
was saying that's the explanation
smoking.
I saw from the historians was like they just made all this up.
Oh,
So,
they say that on everyone. I got several more
Yeah,
um, documents, ancient documents. A lot of them go into the 13th, 14th centuries, some before.
yeah,
The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is another good one. I'll pull it up here, and it
and
says that
just on that point, because when I was doing the research, I came across some writers who were making that point that Jeff is making, this
yeah,
criticism of that.
yeah.
And again, okay, so but what that is, that's an opinion
Hmm.
of some historians about what they think about it.
Right.
They don't have any documented proof for that opinion. And
Yeah.
again, all I'm trying to say to people out there is be careful when you read criticisms on
Hmm.
either side.
Yeah.
Use your critical analysis and say, okay, does this person have proof of some sort? Like AJ is quoting from different sources. He's mentioning Assyrian cuneiform. That's pretty solid,
Yeah.
what the Assyrians said about something. But when these historians have an opinion, and listen, they're entitled to their opinion. They don't have to agree with what some of us are saying about this, but it's an opinion, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
yeah.
So you know what? When I was looking at it, to me, and I started thinking about it. Why would they want to make that up? Like,
Yeah.
would they have known their history? Would they have had an oral history that was transferred down
Yeah,
or
yeah.
writing? Like, why would they?
And
Why would
all
they
of
have
them,
made that
not
up?
just
That makes no
one.
sense.
Yeah, not just one of them, all of them. Anglo-Saxon
Yeah.
Chronicle, the Brute, the dissertations on the history of Ireland, the
Yeah.
Declaration of Marabout. They're all forging these documents, several hundred years apart.
One more point on this. Many people will say, well, in the 17 and 1800s, that's when this Brit Israel idea really came into being. That there were books written at that time, no doubt about it. It became a bigger issue. But this is proof that way back in the 1300s, this idea was already there.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting piece of information.
It is.
Well, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which I've got, right over here that we're looking at, it's saying that they came from Armenia, which is the same area between the Black and the Caspian Seas of Scythia. And it dates to the 9th century. Okay, it comes from the common stock of the Chronicle, which is the 9th century. So once again, we're talking 800 years before this British Israelism movement happened. So explain that one to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just ridiculous. It's revisionist history. It is what it is. I decided to revise what I thought history should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, another good one that I found up here, which is pretty interesting, is we mentioned this map before, the all these Dutch maps that refer to the Hebrews, Hebrae de Insulae, meaning the island of the Hebrews. I mean, it's not just one piece of evidence; it's multiple pieces of evidence.
Yeah, and for me, when I went and looked that up too, I was like, I got to see if they say it was real, and that's a real map that really says that. I mean, I was like, okay, so that's what it says. You can't deny that.
Yeah, and there's just a ton of evidence out there. There's a really good book out there. It's once again, it's in the 1700s. It's called the History of Ireland, Origin of the Scots and the History of Ireland by Charles O'Connor. And once again, it's basing its information off of a bunch of earlier manuscripts that he had at the time, and it was also confirmed by Sir Isaac Newton. Believe it or not, Sir Isaac Newton was a proponent of the British Israelism, or the identification of the Israelites, and he traced them back to Scythia as well. So it's not just one document; it's multiple other documents. The Brute, the dissertations on the taking of Ireland, Scotland, on down the line. There's just multiple documents out here. It's not just one. And like I said, we could spend all afternoon pulling up these.
Yeah, and if people want to if people want more details, we'll mention your previous show, which was if people want to get that, send a note to me or Jeff. We'll give you the exact date of that.
And you have a website and YouTube channel that goes into it more too, right?
If you go to my website, myhebrewroots.org, and you just click on videos, and I think it's the first or second one down, and you can see I've got a full hour-length video specifically on this topic. It's information packed, and it's got a full bibliography where you can look up all the documents and where you can pull them up. It's got a regular full bibliography in the comment section, and so you can look up all the information that's there. That's where you're going to find all the proof to, check it out yourself as well. But one of the biggest pieces of information, I think, is the biggest smoking gun to all of this, is the connection between the Celtic Gaelic languages and the Semitic languages, meaning Hebrew. And this was another thing that Sir Isaac Newton brought up, was this resemblance between the Hebrew and the Celtic Gaelic languages. And if you go online, there's multiple videos that talk about this strange connection between the Celtic languages and the Semitic languages. And there's not just one of them. I got a few pulled up here. There's another one here, and another one here. There's just a lot of different videos on this topic. And this one guy here, he's a linguistic expert right here. There's a link in the description of my video as well. You can listen to it yourself. And he mainly talks about the structure and the linguistic connection between the Celtic Gaelic languages and Hebrew. And there's a ton of them. For instance, I got a little chart I made up here between the two. And let me go. Wrong chart. There we go. There's the chart. So, and all this is coming from his video, and he's, like I said, he's a linguistic expert. And these are all the similarities between the Celtic and Semitic languages. The use of inflected prepositions, where a preposition modifies a noun rather than using it as a separate word. Now, keep in mind, out of 7,000 languages today, there's only a handful that use this system. And two of them are the Celtic languages and the Semitic languages.
AJ, what does the number mean? Greater than 1%, greater than 9%?
It's less than 1%.
Okay.
Less than 1%. Of all the languages on the planet, less than 1%.
Okay, got it.
Inflected prepositions.
Got it.
And then you have the VSO word order, where you have the verb, how Yoda talks, go to the house we will, and that's how Hebrew is spoken. It's the VSO word order. And once again, less than 9% of the languages on the planet today use this VSO word order. Okay. The other thing is, many Bible students know, is there's a definite article, but there's no indefinite article. So if you have a noun that doesn't have, we use the letter A for our indefinite article. Hebrew doesn't have this. They just leave it out completely. And that's implied that there's an indefinite article. And then you've got the use of the constructive genitive state, non-linear morphology, triconsonant roots. All the words in Hebrew that are not loan words, they all have 3-letter root letters. And use of resumptive pronouns. I don't know what that means, but anyway, if you watch the video, so I pumped this all into AI and I asked him, well, what's the mathematical probability that you would have all these very unique characteristics, and what's the probability that these two languages aren't related, right? And it's like less than one. I estimated it myself. I was thinking it was be less than 1 in a million, and it came up with less than 1 in 13 million.
Wow.
So I underestimated. But
yeah. This person in the video you're referring to, do they believe in their origins, that the Celtics are Hebrew origin, or are they just making just talking about the language only?
Oh, well, no. In those videos that I mentioned, they show there's a definite relationship between these two videos. They don't have any explanation for it. They don't give an explanation. Gotcha. They just say, hey, it's crazy how similar these two languages are.
So they're just, so in other words, this is like an independent person saying, hey, I've looked at this. This is the information I'm getting. I don't have a preconceived bias, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And they all come up with the same conclusion, that they don't understand why these because if you look on all the linguistic charts and stuff, they basically say that there's no relationship. The Celtic Gaelic languages are an Indo-European or Indo-Germanic language, and the Semitic languages, are completely separate. And yet, why do you have so many similarities? There's another book that came out, and once again, this was in 1892, and it's called The Affinity Between the Hebrew and the Celtic Languages. And he spoke both apparently, and he went through all the words that are very similar in meaning and in sound, meaning there's a Celtic word and there's a Hebrew word, and they sound very similar in the way they sound and in the meaning of the language. And he came up with 450 connections of words that are very similar in meaning and in sound. And I highlight some of the bigger ones here. Let me do full screen on this. So, for instance, as many of us know, Ab is father and Bar is son, right? Well, in Celtic, it's the same. And then Amar means to say, well, in Celtic, Abar means to say. You ever wonder why in the Bible you hear about a bath, of water, amount to hold water? And it's the same in English. It also is a bath that holds water, Well, it's because bath is a Celtic language. It was borrowed into English, and it actually borrows it from Hebrew, because they both refer to either to quench with water or amount of water. Bor in Hebrew is a pit to hold water, and Beor is to dig a pool for water. Gamal is the Hebrew word for camel. Well, Kamal, that's where we get camel from, is from the Gaelic side. They're almost the same. Moed is an assembly. Mode is an assembly in Celtic. And the one I like the most is, in Hebrew, maski means to drink. Well, in Celtic, whiskey means to drink, to have a drink. And then we modified it in English. We refer specifically to, hard whiskey, a hard drink. But once again, tell me how these very unique similarities, almost identical, especially father and son, are the same in the Celtic as in the Hebrew. Tell me how that's a coincidence. I mean, come on, really? I mean, it's math. Not only is it mathematically impossible you're going to have all these sentence structures, but what's the possibility you're going to have so many similarities, so many loan words, and then you're going to tell me there's no connection between these two languages? Well, they're just lying. They're just flat out lying. Okay. There is a demonic influence, I believe, over our colleges and universities to suppress anything about with God. And if they were to admit the origins of the Northwest European peoples and make that connection to the northern tribes of Israel, it would prove all those blessings happened exactly as God said they took place.
Okay, a question arises. We're talking about the Celtic people, and these are mostly in Ireland.
Celtic Gaelic peoples. No, they're all
Yeah,
through Western Europe.
all throughout
Okay,
Western Europe.
you know Gaul. It was the area that was originally called France, right?
Okay.
Well, the kingdom of the Franks, which is a German kingdom, they actually conquered Gaul and they took it over and they named it after themselves. So France, the French people aren't French. Okay, that's a German name. That's a German tribe that
Hmm.
conquered them. They're actually Gaelic, and that was the name. And there's a French Gaelic. It's since a dead language. It doesn't exist anymore. But there is French Gaelic. There's Scots Gaelic.
Okay.
There's Welsh Gaelic. There's all these Gaelic languages throughout there. Some of them are dead languages. Some of them are sort of still going. And then you have the
Now
Anglo-Saxon.
yeah, that's what they ask you about the Anglo Saxons. Is the Celtics and Anglo Saxons related, or are they separate peoples?
So you had two migration paths, pretty much as I've been following this. There was ones that went by boat. They left early, and they went by boat to uh, Iberia. They went to the three Iberias: the Iberia between the Black and Caspian Sea, the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain, and then they went up to the Iberia of Scotland and Ireland. And that was a migration path. Those people kept the Gaelic language, the Hebrew language. Then the ones that migrated on land, they migrated, and they were most likely also the individuals who were by Halah and Habor along the Gozan River because they were closer to Nineveh. They stayed and migrated on land with the Assyrians because shortly after, remember, shortly after the Israelites got conquered, the empire of Assyria fell, and they
Right.
also fled. And they had an outpost in Trier, up there in Trier. Trier is known to be an Assyrian outpost. And so they ended up going that direction. The Israelites ended up going that direction. They knew the language and they started trading. They became friends apparently at some point in time, but they remained separate. And so that's why you have half of the um, Northwest European peoples speak a Germanic language, Scandinavia, Norway, all those speak a Germanic language. And then you
Okay.
have the other half that originally had a Gaelic language. And here's the big question is, if you know how languages get transferred, there's two ways that you become, you impose your language on another country. One is you're the lingua franca, you're the international language of the day.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to do business with you. You control the area. That's how you get someone to impose your language on it. Two is you conquer them, right? When did the Germanic people ever conquer the English to impose their language on them? No time in history.
Hmm.
But the Assyrians conquered the Israelites. The Assyrians conquered the Israelites, and they
Hmm.
were the international language of the day. They were the Assyrian Empire rule. So that's
Hmm.
why you've got part of the Israelites that kept their Gaelic language, their Hebrew language, and you got the other half, the Angles, the Saxons, the Caucasians, all of those um, that adopted a Germanic language, and all the Nordic tribes, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, they all have a Germanic language as well. And so
Hmm.
that's why you've got two separate individuals with two separate languages, but they're all part of the 10 tribes of Israel. So that's just a side note. But
Okay.
that's the big question. Ask them, well, when did you get conquered by the Germans? Why do you have a Germanic language? Well,
Hmm.
it's because the Syrians conquered the Israelites.
Okay, AJ, we got about 25 minutes left to go here, so I know you wanted to get to some scriptures, and I
Yes.
love listening to you, but I know you want to hit some scriptures.
Sure, sure. So one question that comes up is, and this is something I brought up before, was why is it that this information is suppressed? And I believe it's because of all of these prophecies that were fulfilled. The promises made to Abraham had to be fulfilled. And as
Hmm.
you might say that maybe one or two of these could be interpreted a different way, or maybe Solomon kept a couple of these, or there were times in the nation that you could have said that they might. But when you start putting them all together, you realize the ancient nation of Israel never fulfilled these promises. This is what Yahweh told Jacob in Genesis 27:28. Let people serve you, let nations bow down to you. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south, and in your seed all nations of the earth shall be blessed. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. So you could sort of say some of this was fulfilled in ancient Israel, but spreading abroad to the east, to the west, to the north, and the south, all nations being blessed through Israel. Now, I can show you a lot of charts that show that between the Pax Americana and the Pax Britannica, the wealth and the population of the world has exploded. I do have a chart I can show you if you got a second.
Hey, AJ, while you're doing that, I just want to give one example of what you just said from Scripture. It's an interesting scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 10 and 11. And this gets to the idea of a duality within prophecy dealing with Israel. Because some people say, oh, Israel fulfilled these because there's some scriptures in the Old Testament that lead you to think, oh, that it does talk about them as the sand of the sea. It does say that Solomon was great with the riches. But when you look at Israel at Solomon's time, they were not the greatest nation in that area. Okay, they were good and they had a lot going on. But let me give you one scripture because this shows you the two things happening at once. It's in Deuteronomy 1, verse 10 and 11. Yahweh your Elohim hath multiplied you, and behold, you are this day as the stars of heaven for multitude. So some will say, oh, well, see, they became as the stars of heaven. But notice what the next verse says. Verse 11. Yahweh Elohim of your fathers make you 1,000 times so many more as you are, and bless you as he has promised you. So it's saying, yeah, God is doing something for you here. When you go into Canaan and you take over, God said he's going to do that, and he did it. And then we get the law of Moses in there, and if you do this, you're going to be blessed. If you do that, you're going to be cursed. But he also says here in the very next verse, he's going to do even more of that to you. And so I want you to understand this, because we aren't going to get to all these scriptures today, but I want you to understand that duality principle here with prophecy. Sorry for taking up some time here. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, and that's a good point, because sure, you can interpret it a certain way, but are you reading all of it in context? Are you reading all of the attributes? Especially when it's in Genesis 49, where it gives the all the descriptions of the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, at the latter days. So right before the return of Jesus Christ, all the tribes of Israel are going to be blessed. That's the impression you get. And that's the situation we're in right now. As we approach the time of the end, all the modern nations of Israel have been blessed. Israel, the Jews who have been running with their tail between their legs for the last 2,000 years, now have their own nation. They have a very strong military. They are very wealthy. And that's where you see these prophecies about Judah being fulfilled. Remember, they're going to be like a lion, and they're going to destroy their enemies. If you look over there in Genesis chapter 49, that was to happen not 2,000 years ago or at the time of Solomon. It was supposed to take place at the time of the end. And that's where we're at right now, where these prophecies weren't fulfilled, as he says right here, gathered, I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Okay, that's the
and again, Genesis 49:10 specifically, AJ, talks about the scepter won't depart from Judah, but then it says, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. And many commentators say the gathering of the people relates to other prophecies that talk about the nations coming to Jerusalem to learn about the laws of God and everything when the millennial reign begins. So again, it fits the other prophecies that this is the literal time of the end, the second coming of Christ, you know?
Right.
Hey, I have a question for you, AJ. So just kind of maybe an overall summary, like taking like the information that you have of migrations and peoples where they traveled. What nations would you say today? What nations would you say today are or would be the 10 tribes of Israel? Like if you could just name those nations. Do you have a specific,
Sure.
or is it more in general? Is it specific or is it general?
Well, first of all, the British Commonwealth, right? So we're talking about Australia, New Zealand, because remember they're going to
Mhm.
be a nation and accompany a nation, and it says that they're going to drive peoples, not their peoples, but other nations, drive other nations to the ends of the earth, right? So that's
Mhm.
the British Commonwealth. Obviously, Ephraim Manasseh. Manasseh was to be a great nation. Okay, that's United States. And then you've got the Scandinavia, Norwegians, you've got France, you've got the
Mhm.
Basque of Spain, you've got the
We say Basque of Spain. Is that describe what is that? Is
uh,
that specific people?
so there's the Castilian Spanish because I'm Sanchez and I came from Spain, so I know all about this. There's the
Gotcha.
Castilian Spanish, they're further south, and then you had the sheep herders, and that's where I came from. The sheep herders up there
Okay.
in northern Spain, between there and France, and they were called the Basque.
Yeah.
And
Now
one,
Spain did a lot of colonization as well, right? As far as so would that been an Israelite nation colonizing?
yeah, that was mainly those Castilians that ran us out
Okay.
when they tried to give us the Inquisition.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, not a big fan of those guys. I could have got citizenship there because I proved that I was part of the Inquisition, and I was like, no, I don't want to go back there. You tried to kill me the first time I was there. Why would I go back for more of that? So, but yeah, so it'd be the Basque, which is the northern. Uh, uh, they're more blonde hair, blue eyed. The southern Spaniards have got the darker hair, brown eyes.
Hmm.
So they're the northern Basque of Spain. Um, and then obviously, like I said before, the British Commonwealth, uh, Denmark, um, Holland. Holland, as it said, is going to be a haven for ships, as Zebulun
Hmm.
here says Zebulun is to be a haven for ships. That's the Dutch Holland. So that's another very interesting one. You know, Finland is Issachar. There's actually a paper that was published by a church member specifically on the Finland being Issachar. Very long paper. I can give you a copy of that one, but they've got a lot of historical references to that as well. So um, that's basically the gist of it. But here's the real reason it's important. All of a sudden you got to know why does this matter? Why do I care?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, when it comes to end time Bible prophecy, and I firmly believe this, you're not going to be able to understand end time Bible prophecy unless you understand who the lost tribes of Israel are, who the nations of Israel are.
Hmm.
Because I'm not that interested in the sixth trumpet or the fourth bowl that's poured
Hmm.
out, because by that time the saints have already been killed off. They get the persecution of the saints comes on the fifth seal. So you've got seven seals,
Hmm.
seven trumpets, seven plagues, seven bowls. That's like 28 events. Well, the persecution of the saints comes on the fifth seal. Okay, the fifth seal. So you got to have the head. You got to be paying attention pretty early in the game,
Hmm.
because if you stick around for the fifth seal, it doesn't go well for the people of God. And so we know from Second Thessalonians, when we look at the uh, precursors, one of the first events that take place, mark the beginning of the time of the end, is the falling away of truth. Remember, that's what Paul says: do not think that day will come unless there's a falling away of truth. And
Hmm.
the man of sin, the son of perdition, is revealed. Well, the third one is the decline and fall of modern Israel. And so as you see this falling away from truth, which I believe we're in right now, when you look at just the lies that go around nowadays, we don't know what a man or a woman is. Putin blew up his own pipeline. That paper mask is going to save your life. You go on to all these lies. They're just getting out of control. I believe there's a good chance we could be in this falling away of truth right now, where the lies and deception. Remember, Christ said, take heed that no man deceives you, this time of deception. And then the man of sin comes on the scene. And then at the same time, and this is more of a process than an initial event, is the decline and fall of the modern nations of Israel. And so as they get economically, politically, socially, are destroying themselves, that is a big wake-up time for us. And so we really need to understand end-time Bible prophecy. We need to understand who the modern nations of Israel are. And there's a ton of scriptures that talk about their collapse and them being thrown into captivity. Ezekiel, let's start with a couple of good ones. Jeremiah chapter 30. Jeremiah chapter 30. For behold, the days are coming when I will restore from captivity my people, Israel and Judah. So it's not talking about the Jews only. It's also talking about the northern tribe of Israel. Both. So they're both going to be brought back from captivity. Well, that means they're in captivity at the time. I will restore the land I gave to the fathers, and then they will possess it. Jeremiah 31, verse 31 says, where he says, I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and Judah. So they're both going to be alive, and he's going to restore that connection he has with them. Mm-hmm. Ezekiel 36, I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. So the nations of Israel are going to be in national captivity, and they're going to be enslaved, and they're going to be destroyed. Ezekiel 39. So the house of Israel will know that I am their Lord in that day forward, and the nation shall know that the house of Israel was exiled for their iniquity. Well, keep in mind, Ezekiel's writing 150 years after the Assyrians already put him into captivity. So either he's like really late to the game, he's a really bad prophet, or he's talking about a future event. Well, we know he's talking about a future event because it talks about the fact that he's going to restore them. I will bring back the captives of Jacob, have mercy on the whole house of Israel, and after they have borne their shame and their sins, what they have sinned against me. So there's Hosea, there's Isaiah, there's tons of these scriptures that talk about at the end times the nations of Israel will be restored, but that means they're going to be restored. They are going to be restored back to their land. But prior to that, they're going to go through destruction. You talk about all the warnings that Ezekiel gives against them. A third will die by famine, third by pestilence. He's talking about the physical nations of Israel at that time. And
so again, when you look at this now, this is the big elephant in the room. Okay, let's say this theory is correct. Okay, on who Israel might be. Okay, and I'm going to use the word theory because I want to make sure that we're objective here. And so if this is true, here's the big kicker on this. That means some bad things are going to happen to the Western nations who are at their peak right now, as far as in the world, who has control of things, or who's in charge of many things, who has the mightiest military. And when you look at the Middle East, if you look at Israel, the nation, as Judah, they do have the mightiest military in the Middle East right now. Mm-hmm. So again, that is something to say, oh my goodness, if all those nations were hammered in some way, wow, then people, that would be something to speak into when that is beginning. Mm-hmm. And maybe it would wake up some people if they could see that great diminishment of power of these nations that are so powerful right now. I think that would be a great wake-up call to those peoples at that time. If we got this correct,
Well, I have a question. Maybe y'all thought about this. I think my understanding of the United States, about 90 million people would be from like British or Irish origins in the United States. I think around 45 million to 50 million are German origin, 30 or 40 million are Mexican, and we have Spanish origin. So we have more than just those Northern European people in our country. So
Yes.
how could you say we're all Israel if there's some that aren't in that category? What would you answer? How would you answer that?
Well,
AJ, you want to take that first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the Germans, there's a high and a low German. And it is my belief, once again, because the Israelites and the Assyrians moved up into that area of Germany together.
Yeah.
And so I believe those Germans that moved over here were, in fact, Israelites. I believe they were from the tribe of Manasseh. But other than that, that's just a side note. Yeah, there is a lot of foreigners in this. It's a mixed multitude. But Israel always has been kind of a mixed multitude. They're one of the few countries out there that had specific laws protecting foreigners, protecting those who weren't native in the land. And you had to give them a little special treatment, not like we're doing nowadays, but you did. You were required to give them a little bit of welfare, a little bit. And so, but there's individuals mixed in with us. But as a nation, it's our culture, and it's up until now we've driven the nation, and we've been in charge, and it's been our culture, and we're responsible for it. Will they get the brunt of our punishments at the time of the end? Probably, but the whole planet's going to get it eventually.
I mean, because if you look at the prophecies are not just against Israel; they're against all kinds of nations out there that God's going to bring down.
Israel, the modern nation of Israel, are going to get it first, and that's a big thing to watch. I mean, our debt is out of control. We can't pay it. It's mathematically impossible. We can't sell our bonds. They have these bond auctions all the time. We can't sell any bonds. They were selling 60-day bonds, not 30-year treasury, 60 days. That's like going to the payday loan place and getting a payday check or
a payday bond.
Yeah. We're just doing it for cash flow. And so when we collapse, like the Soviet Union is, our military, we won't be able to pay for it. And we're the only thing keeping the nation of Israel afloat. Our weapons and monetary aid that we give to Israel, that's one of the big reasons they've been able to do what they've done, is through our help. Great Britain is right behind. And here's a big kicker for you. Have you noticed how all of these Western European nations are getting overrun by Gentiles? They're just getting overrun. I believe, we're in the age of the Gentiles today. The number one baby's name in the UK right now is Mohammed. That's the number one name. And so they're just getting overrun. The crime's out of control there. And I believe we're in this decline and fall now. When the US dollar collapses, all of Western Europe is going to collapse. And that can happen. It could happen tomorrow. We cannot pay back our debt. We've gotten ourselves into such a pinch where the biggest ticket item on our budget now is the interest on the debt. Can you imagine that? Out of all your payments you had to make on a monthly basis, your biggest payment was just paying the interest on your credit card, and you're going to tell me you're not going to go bankrupt?
Yeah.
It's out of control.
So the United States, you're saying, is kind of like a house of cards or whatever, just ready to tumble because our foundations are weak in morally, financially, so many areas right now.
And again, I look at this a little bit from a typological perspective, that there were prophecies about Jesus that we understand in the New Testament because Jesus revealed that those things were about him in the Old Testament. But some of those things in the Old Testament that Jesus said were about him were also about the nation of Israel. So again, that duality principle is in play with prophecy. So I think the hint is where Israel might be today through what AJ's been talking about. But when we come to the modern Israel, it's a type of what ancient Israel was. And what I mean by that is Christianity has now taken over in that sense of the United States and the UK and what they did throughout the world with that religion. It's not the ancient Jewish religion. So again, in Christianity, anybody in the US who's a citizen, again, still most of the country is still Christian, but it's a different kind of Christianity than the biblical Christianity. Just like ancient Israel's religion, that mixing with the false religion was different than what God had originally planned. So again, I see those typologies playing out in the US and the UK today. And that idea of the connection back to the Israelites hereditary or biologically, I don't think is as big a deal like what AJ was saying. A mixed multitude came out of Egypt. Egyptians were brought. When a slave wanted to be part of Israel, all they had to do was keep the religion and they were part of Israel. The same thing's true with Christianity. The problem is we don't know what real Christianity is.
Well, I mean, I guess we have a lot of people in our country who say they worship the God of the Bible, right? But they don't do what he says.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
They say, they say this is our God, but we don't do what God asks us to do.
Yeah. Well, and John the Baptist made it very clear that, that position of being that special and peculiar people, that example nation, is going to be taken from you and given to a nation bearing fruits of. And he says the axe is laid at the root and is going to cut it off. And he was talking about the nation of Israel, all of them. They have lost that position of being that special, peculiar nation, that example nation to the world. They've lost that. It's been handed over to the church. So the spiritual responsibility of that the priesthood has, they've been disqualified, in my opinion. This has been given over in the new covenant to the church. We're supposed to let the light shine. We're supposed to be that light on a hill. Okay. Not Israel lost their opportunity. That's our job now. But that doesn't negate all of these prophecies, end time Bible prophecies, specific prophecies about what's going to happen in the latter days. They're going to happen just as God says. And just as the blessings have happened, just as God said, the curses will happen just as God said. Another interesting thing is if you look at the blessings and cursings chapters of, I think it's Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah.
If you look at historically of what happened to ancient Israel or to the Jewish nations, most of them never happened. And so from that, it is my opinion, those blessings and cursings chapter, the cursings chapters are end time. That is another clarification of what's going to happen at the end times. Because the Assyrians didn't wipe out and decimate the northern Israelites. The cuneiform records are very clear that they tried to preserve as many people as they had because they wanted them there on the border cities, defense cities, to hold the line and move forward. And they had a very vested interest in keeping them alive. Well, you read the blessings and cursings chapter, the curses, it's everybody's dying. Everybody's starvation, pestilence. You're going to eat your own children. I mean, it's horrific. These are end time Bible prophecies.
Yeah, great point to what you're saying. Matthew 24, where it says, pray that you don't have to flee on the Sabbath or in the winter, letting you know that there are God's people in Jerusalem at that time keeping the Sabbath, or anywhere in the world keeping the Sabbath, that the Sabbath is dealing with the end times there,
Yeah. All right. Hey, thank you, AJ. I'm sure you didn't get to half of what you wanted to talk to today, or even a quarter of it. But,
I didn't even get to talk about the Stone of Destiny. I really want to talk about the Stone of
AJ, I know you're doing some research on
Destiny?
that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff. Yeah, if he could
Yeah,
give
maybe
his
we do a program on that in the future on the Stone of Destiny.
I'd love to. We could make a part 3 out of this real easy. So if that's what you want to do. But,
yeah. All right. So we got to say goodbye to everybody right now. But before we go, is there anything you want to leave people with? Any final comments, AJ?
Yeah, if we could if I could put a plug in again for my website, because I have a lot of material specifically on this topic on the full video. If you go to my web page and you just click on videos right here, and I need to get a faster internet connection apparently.
Yeah.
But I've got this one here on the Lost Tribes of Israel, and it will fill in a lot of the blanks. And like I said, there's a really good bibliography. You can check the sources on all the information that I have on here as well. So I do appreciate the time that you've given me over the last few sessions, and I look forward to doing this again.
All right. Well, hey,
Thanks, man.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see everybody not next week, but I guess we'll see everybody on Trumpets. We'll be broadcasting on the CGI Digital Network from Trumpets from all our different locations, but we will not have Approve All Things for 2 weeks, and then we're going to take a break for Tabernacles as well. So it's the Holy Day season, and it's coming soon. All right. Again, thank you, AJ. Thanks, Mike. Thanks everyone out there for being a part of this, and we'll see everybody next time we have this Approve All Things. Goodbye.